he's just doing a bad job. Just a bad job. Bravo Delta, when Ukraine offensive? Probably in like a month, be my guess. June. When the ground gets nice and dry and those tanks can burn it up. They've already secured a huge portion of the Dnipro River. Let's go back to the Google Earth. I do wish I had like a Google Earth overlay showing like what's happening. Oh, we are all turned around. There we go. My brain can handle that now. Okay, so this whole area along here, the Ukrainians have crossed over. This whole southern edge here and the southern end near Kherson, they've crossed over, and the Russians have run away. So now they have a staging ground where they can bring in mortars and artillery. They got their mortars and artillery. They can keep the Russians away for quite a ways with mortars and artillery from here. But now they can set up here and start hitting a whole bunch of smaller towns. They're inside this huge, vast country. And this allows them to push straight towards Crimea if they want, or to push further east and get into like, a lot of the Donetsk and Donbass itself. Losing this southern front is a big deal because the Russians do not have the manpower or the artillery to take it back. At best, the Russians have some 1,500-pound gliding bombs. They can make really big craters, but they're not very exact. They don't use GPS. You just kind of let them loose and hope that it hits your target 40 kilometers away. And it's much more of a weapon of terror than like a precise military weapon, because if you don't know where it's going to go, you don't have a specific target set up. You just hope it hits somewhere and messes up people's day, and they go, "Oh, that sucks." That's the best you can do with that stuff. Whereas, the NATO artillery, you can get it within a meter and it does an airburst and just wipes out everything underneath it. And it is a lot more taxing. It is a lot more deadly, a lot more exact. And they can do a lot of shooting out of sight because they've got the drone operators now giving them exact coordinates and elevation levels and telling them exactly where to shoot. And they just dial that stuff in. It's quite phenomenal. There were lots of rumors that there were small marine groups that were coming into places like these weird little spits and stuff and dropping off things and getting in contact with resistance people that are in here. Set up a good network. So when they do make a push, it's going to be a big one. Google turned off their traffic notifications. So you used to be able to go on Google Maps and see the traffic was happening. And there was a bunch of traffic. There's some highways that cross up through these spits here. And there was a lot of traffic fleeing Crimea. So Crimea is gonna be on the hot seat soon. I think this summer it's when the Ukrainians move. I think it's gonna be pretty fast because the Russians just don't have bullets, right? Like, how are you gonna make a stand if you don't have bullets? And they've wasted so much ammunition and so many lives up on Bakhmut that the Ukrainians were happy. They're 7-1, I think, is the ultimate ratio right now, happened in Bakhmut. And where am I looking here? I might type it in because I'm not seeing it right away. Bakhmut. Yes. Oh, way further east. Okay. So out here in Bakhmut. And so for 8 months now, the city's been surrounded on 3 sides by the Russians, and the Russians have been getting mowed down on 3 sides by the Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainian artillery is able to push the Russians far back enough that our Russian artillery is no longer hitting the road, their supply road. Supplies are coming in, and they're able to give reinforcements regularly and take out the soldiers who are just weary from doing the door-to-doors and whatnot. But seriously, it's 7-1. The Russians are losing 500 to 1,000 soldiers a day on this one annihilated city. And it's just been a meat grinder. And the Ukrainians will just keep it going because, 3,000 to 7,000 soldiers a week can get killed there. The Russians do not have the manpower to keep that up. It's just, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the videos or the pictures that come out of there. It is gruesome. Like some of these fronts here are just, they tell the Mobiks, they're calling them, the mobilized soldiers, the ones that have been conscripted, and they're like, charged. And like, we don't have any bullets. Well, we're going to shoot you in the back of the head if you don't charge. So charge. And they run and they get mowed down by machine gun nests and they fall down. And then the next day, another group does it and they get mowed down. And it's just, the corpses are just piling up. It is absolutely horrific and not smart warfare. The Russians do not have the population they once did. They do not have an unlimited population like they did in World War II. They just cannot like throw more people than bullets at the solution, at the problem anymore as a solution. And they're going to get their ass kicked. And I know that Marius is going to make a video that's going to say something like, Ukrainians are going to kick the shit out of the Russians. And that'll be the title. And you just watch. The most comments I've had in a video recently was the last time I talked about Ukraine, and it was all these pro-Russian bots just showed up. They're like, screw you, Russia's the strongest ever. No, they're not, dude. Russia has a smaller economy than, like, Oregon. They pulled all their money and wealth out of there a long time ago. Even the Russians don't care about Russia at this point. Putin's, missing a thyroid or something. It's going to be... This summer is going to be really illuminating as to just how fast. And I don't even know what the Ukrainians are going to do. Every time the Ukrainians have done an offensive, they've done something really clever and unique. And I'm kind of excited to see what they do that I can't see coming. Because the Russians certainly don't see it coming. They don't know what the hell's going on. They're stuck using 2G cell phone towers, and all their calls are being intercepted. They have no encrypted radio. The generals keep having to go to the front, and then they get murdered because there's no communications. They gotta give some orders, and then they get sniped. It's absolutely. This is gonna be one of those Darwin Award classes that you'll see at the War College happening someday. Can you believe this is what the Russians did? Don't do that. There'll be a warning for everybody. Okay. Honey Horse, BlackRock is trying to fund the rebuild of Ukraine. Maybe. My guess is that they'll take the hundreds of billions of dollars that have been seized that were Russian oligarch money and use that to rebuild Ukraine. Hamburger, Lesher Pickles, good morning. Good evening. Javi A, what do you think of Zelensky and Xi talks? Are we close to the end of the war or years of conflict? I think Zelensky talking to Xi is a good thing. You'll notice that Putin begged China for weapons, and China was like, no. And they outright told Wagner Group they weren't giving you anything. Wagner Group's like, we'll pay you. And China's like, no. I think there's two reasons. One, the Chinese do not want to see their weapons getting shredded by 1980s NATO technology. They know that their designs will not hold up against 1980s NATO tech. They know that. And they can't keep threatening Taiwan if Taiwan knows that all their Atacams and HIMARS and Javelins and everything else are just going to whoop on and sink the entire Chinese fleet in a matter of hours. That they can't keep using this saber rattling of Taiwan to score political points around the globe. Two, they want Russia to fail. This whole BRICS thing, it's Russia and China and India. Russia, China, India all hate each other. They are not allies. They hate each other's guts. There's constantly skirmishes between China and India. India has teamed up with Japan to compete against China for the moon. China wants all of Russia's resources. They've already had wars in the 60s against each other. They hate each other's guts. So while they both hate America, they hate each other just as much. So they'll do some lip service in public. But when it comes down to it, Xi would love to see Putin die, see the balkanization of the Russian Republic, and then Xi could either physically take over Manchuria and lots of Siberia, or at least have enough influence that they effectively control it as a puppet state. But yeah, China wants oil, China wants gold, China wants copper, China wants coal, China wants natural gas, and all that stuff is in Siberia and not in China itself. And the Chinese are still really upset that they don't have Manchuria. If you guys know where Manchuria is, it is, zoom out, it is this whole chunk up here. So this is Russia, this chunk here. This was historically China. Sakhalin, China, Japan, Russia all lay claim to it. Those are the Ryukyus. These are the Kuril Islands were all Japan, and then Japan lost them in World War II. I wouldn't doubt if Japan takes the Kuril Islands back in a very relatively short period of time. And I wouldn't doubt if there is a conflict over control of Sakhalin Island between Japan and China at that point. But right now, Russia controls Sakhalin, and Japan used to be a Japanese island. But yeah, this whole region used to be China, and the Soviets took it, and the Chinese have been smarting about it ever since. So the big port city of Vladivostok, this used to be a Chinese city, and I wouldn't doubt China wants it back. So if Putin dies, and then there's a giant battle that happens among the elites, the generals and the former FSB leaders and all the oligarchs to take control of Russia, there's going to be a balkanization. And all these, you see all these white lines, all these independent states are going to become little fiefdoms. They'll break away from Russia. You'll see genocide happen because a lot of these places, the Russians are the minority population, like the ethnic Russians are the minority population, and they've lorded over the majority groups there. You know, you might have Kazakhs or Uzbeks or, you know, you name it. And there will be no longer power from Moscow to ensure that the ethnic Russians have power of these folks, and they'll probably just slaughter them wholesale. I wouldn't doubt if we see a whole bunch of lot of little fights happening inside every single one of these eastern states as ethnic Russians try to flee across Siberia and get back across the Ural Mountains, and the ethnic groups chase them out. These groups don't see themselves as Russian first. They see themselves as like Kazakh. Like, I'm a nomad. I don't give a shit whose flag is there because I have to take my cattle herd across this field and up those mountains in the summer and then back down in the winter and hope to hopefully survive the worst weather in the entire world. A lot of these groups, they still do a lot of ancient practices when it comes to working as herders, shepherders, migratory people who live off the land. And they've just been beaten down by ethnic Russians for a long time. So China, this big old rich country right here, they'll give Putin all the lip service in the world, but they know Putin's weak as shit. The minute Putin had to come to them for help, they knew it was over. And so I think Xi is just waiting for Putin to die, and then they'll just poke the bear and set off a whole bunch of ethnic disputes happening, and then they'll slip in, take Manchuria, and get control over oil fields and gas fields all over Siberia. And that's what I think is going to happen in the end. And then when Marius cuts this thing, you guys can see all the comments from a bunch of pro-Russian robot accounts who are going to be very, very, very upset with me. They probably have an FSB file on me right now. Oh, watch out for that guy. Whatever. They're going to burn your building to the ground soon anyway.